There is more than enough food in the world to feed our population of 7.8 billion people. But today, more than 820 million people are hungry. And some 144 million children under the age of 5 are stunted, more than 1 in 5 children worldwide. Our food systems are failing, and the COVID-19 pandemic is making things worse. Unless immediate action is taken, it is increasingly clear that there is an impending global food emergency that could have long-term impacts on hundreds of millions of children and adults. This year, some 49 million extra people may fall into extreme poverty due to the COVID-19 crisis. The number of people who are acutely food or nutrition insecure will rapidly expand. Every percentage point drop in global gross domestic product means an additional 0.7 million stunted children. Even in countries with abundant food, we see risks of disruptions in the food supply chain. We need to act now to avoid the worst impacts of our efforts to control the pandemic.
When the only constant in life is change, you need to be ready. This is the Man-Made Survival Show.
Hello everyone, my name is Jose Prado, Man-Made Survival. Thanks so much for coming back to the channel and watching this video. I hope you share this information with your friends and family, and I really hope you like the videos, you subscribe, because of course that helps a lot with getting this message out to everyone out there that likes to listen to this kind of stuff. And not only that, but also are proactive to doing, the things necessary in order for you to be prepared for any type of scenario. Okay, because a lot of people prepare for fun, preparedness and survivalism and all that stuff has pretty much been a hobby for a lot of people. It was mine until I started doing this, and I want to turn it into a business. But now, as things have progressed, especially in 2020, right, and probably from now on, now since we have a time frame of how things are going to unfold, then all what we were doing as a hobby, or we were doing to prepare for just an event that one day is going to come, now that it's within range from us, where we can see it coming, then our preparedness is going to be more, I guess, toned, right? Because a lot of us, we like to prepare, and we have food, we have water, we have guns and ammo and stuff like that. But maybe we put off learning about communications, or we put off making an actual plan of action if something happened, because we have the information in our head, and, certain things about preparedness is fun. But now that we have a time frame of when things could possibly go down, then there's more of a kind of like a sense of urgency. That's what I'm thinking, right? You're not desperate about what's going on, but you want to make sure that you're ready for it, right? So we have gone through a lot of stuff this year, and the main thing that has happened is the coronavirus. As serious as the riots have been, and the whole movement of defunding the police and Black Lives Matter, and the thing we're seeing in Seattle, even though all that is extremely important because we get a lot of data out of it, right, on how a power vacuum will be filled by a warlord who's gonna impose his will on everyone around him, right? That's not something that happened in a third world country. It's something that's happening in the United States of America. And since this data is so fresh, it's something that we can take and we're going to apply it into our plans and see how this is going to work out, and the strongman is always going to be something that's going to play out when there's a power vacuum. Because if even in the rural country, or in the rural area, even if there's no police, there's going to be some type of element of power somewhere, right? That's just what happens. It's natural. It's natural for humans to do that. All right, so what we're going to be talking about today is the economy, the pandemic, and the food shortages. All right, because we saw how bad it was the past few months with the pandemic, and it's coming back. All right, that's what I'm going to be showing you today. And what we're going to start off with is this first headline. Beijing sounds alarm about dollar's reserve status. This from Zero Hedge. Beijing sounds alarm about demise of mighty dollar. With all the money printing and borrowing, is this the beginning of the long decline for the dollar? Clearly, this is on the minds of some senior Chinese officials. Guo Shunqing, chairman of the China Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission, delivered a strong warning on the U.S. currency this week. He made 4 points in a speech at the Lunjiangxi Forum in Shanghai. A. The Fed is the de facto central bank of the world. When its policy targets its own economy without considering the spillover effect, the Fed is very likely to overdraft the credit of the dollar and the U.S. B. The pandemic may persist for a long period of time, and countries keep throwing money at the problem with diminishing impact. Quote, it is recommended that you think twice and reserve some policy space for the future, end quote. C. There is no free lunch. Watch out for inflation. D. Financial markets are disconnected from the real economy, and such distortions are unprecedented. It is going to be really painful when the policy withdrawal starts. Some people say domestic debt is not debt, but external debt is debt. For the United States, even external debt is not debt. This seems to have been the case for quite some time in the past. But can it really last for a long time in the future? All right, so what he said is very, very important, because now the Chinese central bank, right, they're coming out and telling the United States, watch out what you're doing, because you're taking your people into inflation. And not only that, you're making all the other markets suffer the consequences of you spending all this money and printing endless amount of money, right? And of course, the Chinese are going to position themselves to become the centralized, or not the centralized, the reserved currency as the United States is right now, okay? So keeping that in mind, he's warning, right, that the United States is going to go into inflation because of all the money we're printing, as I've said in the past. And then Peter Schiff came out and said it, and he said it for a while now. And John Williams has come out and said it. Other people have come out and said it, that if we continue the path that we're going, then we're going to create hyperinflation. If we think that right now unemployment is bad, then it's going to be even worse later on. All right. So, and then one of the things that people were wondering is, like, how in the world can the markets be so high with 46 million people unemployed? And of course, it is obvious that the game is rigged, as a lot of people have known for a long time, but now it's more obvious than ever before. And things are a lot worse than 2008. So a lot of people who came out and say that 2008 was just the dress rehearsal for something a lot worse is going to happen in the future, in those days, which is today, they were right. Because as bad as 2008 was, it's not as bad as this is, And of course, all of that is following a trend. And the next article that I have it's also from Zero Hedge, but the way it's set up is that Sputnik contacted Tom Luongo. I hope I say his last name right. But they contacted him, and they asked him questions, about what he thought about the economy and how things are progressing. All right. So here's the headline for that. The debt, the budget, the riots. America's existential triple threat. As I said, it's from Zero Hedge. Sputnik. The United States national debt has exceeded $26 trillion for the first time in American history, Treasury data revealed. What does this number tell us about the current state of the United States economy? What will be the ramifications of this, if any? Tom Luongo. The United States is in terrible shape thanks to unfolding global financial crisis, as well as the capitalist of the COVID-19 response. Locking down the economy only intensified a crisis that was already unfolding, making it far worse than it should have been. The U.S. will run a primary budget deficit of more than $4 trillion this year, above 25% of GDP, at levels not seen since World War II. The the demand for dollar is still very high as the quality of the debt repayable in dollars deteriorates around the world. That demand will only intensify from here. So this was always going to occur. The question was always to what extent and spread out over what time period. COVID-19 exceeded both the severity and the timeline of events. All right, so COVID-19 has been a dead blow to the economies all throughout the world because everybody shut down, everything halted. You know, there was some trade still going back and forth, but it's not as open as it was as far as traveling for vacation was. You know, all the other things that as the world used to run. You know, a lot of economic forums were shut down. A lot of places like that depend on showing off products so they can create more revenue. You know, that's what pretty much got hammered when that happened. So all the economies all throughout the world started coming down, right? So as he was saying, that the demand for the dollar right now is increasing because of the debt of what's going on. But as the Chinese warned that eventually, you know, we're going to hit the peak and then we're going to start going down, right? Because all the debt that we're doing, since we're just creating imaginary numbers or, you know, imaginary money that's not backed by anything, then people are going to start feeling uneasy about the dollar. And they're gonna start looking for other places to move their money around, right? And that's pretty much what will create the dollar to stumble and become weaker and weaker. All right. So as the coronavirus gets worse, and by worst I mean the lockdowns come back, right? We're gonna see even greater damage to the economies all throughout the world. And as I said, it doesn't really matter what we think about it, it's what the government thinks about it, because they're the ones that are going to get the guidelines out of the CDC. They're going to get the guidelines out of your local health department. They're the ones establishing all the rules for restaurants to only have 25% capacity of people inside. And of course, that's just not going to fly for a restaurant to be able to do that. And if the people defy the orders, what they're doing is the city, what they're doing is just rebuking their licenses. They're shutting down their power. They're shutting down their sewer. That's what they're doing. All right. And a business cannot function in that manner. So all the small businesses and others are starting to get hit in two different grounds or two different levels. One, a very dramatic decrease in customers, right? And the other, they're getting hit by the government because they're not complying with the guidelines. So at the end of the day, that's just going to create very pissed off people. And if they think that the riots in Minnesota, in Seattle, in Atlanta, they think they're bad now, you know, just wait until a lot more Americans get pissed off about the fact that they lost their business, that they lost their house, that they cannot feed their kids, right? That even though the government is giving away free money, $600 on top of whatever your state gives you in unemployment, those people are not receiving the benefits, right? Because the system is overwhelmed by millions and millions of people trying to access it all at the same time. We have 46 million Americans unemployed. So if there's a second lockdown, which it seems like it's going to be, which is what I'm about to get into, then you must get prepared now. Because like I said, we're seeing things approach, right? It's not fuzzy anymore. We're seeing it at a distance. All right, so my next headline says this. Fears of virus second wave as China battles fresh outbreak. This from yahoo.com. China reported its highest daily number of new coronavirus cases in months on Sunday, triggering fears of a second wave of infections as more European countries prepare to reopen their borders. Adding to the concern, Italy is fighting a new outbreak of its own. Iran and India have reported worrying increase in deaths and infections, and the pandemic is gathering pace in Latin America. The Middle East's hardest hit country, Iran, reported its own grim uptick on Sunday, recording more than 100 new virus deaths in a single day for the first time in 2 months. And there has been 2 new outbreaks in Rome, with 109 infections included 5 deaths diagnosed at the hospital and 15 cases detected at a building inhabited by squatters. Brazil now has the second highest number of virus deaths after the United States, and the Chilean health minister resigned on the weekend amid a furor over the country's true numbers of fatalities. In the U.S., more than a dozen states, including populous Texas and Florida, have in recent days reported their highest ever daily case totals. Meanwhile, President Vladimir Putin said Sunday that Russia has been more successful at handling coronavirus than the United States. All right, so that article goes on to show, right, a second wave. And it started with China because, of course, that's where the first wave started. But it also went into detail with other countries, not just China. And China has locked down. They have been aggressive the second time again on how they're handling it. They have, if I remember correctly, they have, I think, 21 million people under lockdown again, right? And not only that, but the next article I'm going to show you is going to show you how they did it this time, all right? Here it is. Beijing uses phone data to round up 350,000 people for coronavirus testing and installs facial recognition checkpoints at apartment complexes as 21 million are put under lockdown. That headline is from the Daily Mail, right? So what is really important about that is that Beijing used the phone data, right? It's no longer a conspiracy theory that they're tracking you through your phone. If China is able to do that through network, so is the United States, so is Italy, so it's Iran, and everybody else who was mentioned in the previous article. Okay, so the whole app thing that they were talking about a few months back that they wanted for contact tracing, there it is. All right, so they rounded up 350,000 people, and over 21 million people are under lockdown. And not only that, they have facial recognition checkpoints at apartment complexes. In other words, even if you try to go home, you cannot go home. All right, so the next series of headlines that I'm going to be reading out to you, I'm just reading the headlines, it's going to prove and show how the second wave, or how they're setting you up for a second wave of lockdowns in the United States. Here they are. It may save your life. Facing virus surge, more U.S. states mandate masks. This from news.trust.org. Gila River Casino temporarily closes again after employee death. Arizona's rising COVID-19 cases. This from azcentral.com. Cuomo considers 14-day quarantine for travelers from Florida. This from WCBS880.radio.com. Town shuts off gym's water power for defying coronavirus rules in Massachusetts. This from Charlotte. Yeah, there we go. CharlotteObserver.com. Oak Park woman says she contracted coronavirus twice. That's from Detroit.cbslocal.com. All right, and the headlines go on and on and on. All right, they send Alabama, Arkansas, South Carolina, and others. Florida is a new epicenter. Texas is a new epicenter. Stuff like that. So the headlines have come out, and they're prepping people. All right, they're telling you in the headlines and in the articles. In the middle of the article, they're saying pretty much, they're saying it without saying it. Prepare for the second lockdown. All right, because they have come out and say that the governors are gonna go by what the health department says, pretty much. All right, so that is going on right now. So you must get prepared if you have not already into making yourself or putting yourself in a financial position that you could, the best financial position you could possibly put yourself into. Because if you're one of those people who asked for unemployment and you couldn't get it, then that's the reason why, right? That's why it's important for you to pay attention, for you to go ahead and get in your mind that there's possibly in your state, there's going to be another lockdown, right? Or there's going to be more severe rules about not being able to go to work and seeing all the things that we've been seeing, right? Now, a lot of people have come out and say that they are just simply not going to go along with it anymore, right? They even stopped wearing their masks. They're saying, forget about it. Screw all this. We're just going to go back to work and live our life as normal as possible. But the health department has come out and said, it's like, nobody, no, you're not. All right. And like I said, remember what I said earlier, that it really depends on what the government thinks, because they're the ones enforcing the rules. So if you're in some type of business that is not following the rules, as you would say, what are they doing? They're shutting people's water and power off because they define coronavirus rules, right? That's not just in Massachusetts. That's anywhere else. I talked to a hairdresser lady, people who cut your hair, and she said that they came out that they pretty much said that if you didn't shut down, they were gonna pull her license, and it takes them about 2 years to get it. So she wasn't about to lose it, right? Because she already put all that work into it, and she didn't even know if she just had to go back to school and go through the whole process again to get another license, or how it would even work out, or would she be banned for cutting hair forever and ever, amen? Those are questions that we don't know because we have not been presented with that scenario, or at least people who own businesses, right, that have the brick and mortar storefronts. So what is the population going to do? Are the people in Michigan who went out and protest, they had their guns out and everything, right? And they were pretty much overwhelmed by all the other riots going around that everybody forgot about Michigan. Are they going to go back and demand to be open, or is things going to get violent? I mean, things are only going to get more violent as we go, right? So I want to shift gears here for a second, and I want to go ahead and talk about the food, because the UN is coming out and saying that because of coronavirus, we're going to have a global problem with food and the food supply chain. All right. And a lot of people tend to think, when you think of food shortages and stuff like that, people tend to think third world countries, African countries, places who are already in a bad shape. But no, they're talking about everyone, like America, regular places, because I've reported things that are going on now. A few months ago, I reported how the farmers were saying that because of the snow and rain, early snow in the season, they had to go ahead and try to get as much harvested as possible that was still quality enough to be able to sell. All the other stuff stayed on the ground and rotted there, and they just using it as fertilizer for the next season. But as we saw with the pandemic, farmers couldn't get the workers that they needed, coming from other countries and whatnot, and they couldn't pick the fruits and vegetables out of the ground, so they had to stay there. I mean, it would have been more expensive for them to try to harvest it and try to get it sold somewhere than just leave it on the ground and waiting for the next season to come around to be able to plant. So that's what I'm saying. Those problems are problems that we've faced in the past, but because of the supply chain being so supplied, they have stages to where when one is exhausted, they go to the next. But we have gone all the way to the end, and there's nothing else replacing it, at least not right now. So we might see these food shortages here in the next few weeks. All right, so the next headline that I have for you is this. We need to act now. UN warns world faces worst food crisis in 50 years. This from Searhedge, and I have a video for that. Here it is.
There is more than enough food in the world to feed our population of 7.8 billion people. But today, more than 820 million people are hungry. And some 144 million children under the age of 5 are stunted, more than 1 in 5 children worldwide. Our food systems are failing, And the COVID-19 pandemic is making things worse. Unless immediate action is taken, it is increasingly clear that there is an impending global food emergency that could have long-term impacts on hundreds of millions of children and adults. This year, some 49 million extra people may fall into extreme poverty due to the COVID-19 crisis. The number of people who are acutely food or nutrition insecure will rapidly expand. Every percentage point drop in global gross domestic product means an additional 0.7 million stunted children. Even in countries with abundant food, we see risks of disruptions in the food supply chain. We need to act now to avoid the worst impacts of our efforts to control the pandemic.
All right, so you heard him, right? We have to go ahead and get serious about this. We have to do something now. Now, I have a second video there to show you, because what he says, it's pretty important, all right? And just listen to the wording, or just listen to the choice of his words, all right? Here it is.
ESG today. So first, it's important to understand how distinctive and complex nature of the emerging crisis and how things get much worse the longer this goes. Many unknowns, but large downside potential. And let me make a parallel with a box event. Essentially, up to now, we have gone through the first phase, which is the first jab, which was the lockdown because of COVID-19. And we are now entering into the second jab, which is the food crisis, the economic crisis, which is the consequence of the COVID-19. The problem is that to be able to keep until the end of the fight, we need to be aware in every step of it, because COVID-19 has not been eliminated, and we are at risk at all times that we get a knockout in terms of the food security in the world. Clearly, it's important to recognize that food security is essential for our economy. The scale of the scope of the food economy measured as people is 4.5 billion of 7.8 billion on Earth. So nearly 1/3 of whom are exposed to disproportionate risk. So it's a huge part of our population that are at risk. Not only that, on formal employment in the food systems, we are talking of around 32% of the world working on food systems formally is at risk because of COVID-19. And this means around 431 million people at risk because their jobs are at risk because of COVID-19. And this is mainly in food processing, food packaging, and transportation. 60% of those jobs are at risk.
All right, so they're telling you, all right, the UN is coming out and saying, this is going on. This is what's going to happen. You know, the timeline is not fuzzy anymore. We can see it from here, all right? So what should you do? Which is my next headline. Kids discover there is such a thing as a free lunch. This from SearHedge. Across America, kids are receiving electronic benefit transfers, or EBT, cards in their name. Each card will be loaded with around $365. This is meant to provide these young people who would otherwise have access to free or reduced price meals when schools are open with a free lunch. There are no income requirements in areas where a high percentage of district families are low income, because it means that the entire district qualifies for free or reduced price meals. All right. That right there, to me, personally, to me, that's a good thing. Because, yes, the thought is that since they're not in school anymore, and that money that the school was going to spend on feeding the kid for the rest of the year, they turn it into cash that they give to them and the parents, then I would say that since those families more than likely already received food stamps, that extra $365 that they're giving the kid because he missed, those months of school, in my opinion, they should use that in order for them to stock up on food. And what are the items you should stock up on? It's exactly in my book right here, all right? It's Preppers Secrete Cache. You can go to www.preppersecretcache.com and you can order the book from there, or click the link below. And the book's absolutely free. All we need your help is with shipping. All right, so I'm going to tell you the food items that I tell you to stock up in the book. All right, so here are the supplies that I tell you in the book, all right, to store up. Baking soda, beans, beef jerky, canned fruit, canned meat, canned vegetables, cooking oil, dried milk, dry potatoes, dry rice, flour, honey, pancake mix, pasta, quick oats, sugar, and MREs. All right. All of that, all those items and some others are in the book. All right. For the people who are getting the extra $365 on their EBTs, they should get those items and stock them up, because all of that is storable. All the canned goods, they're going to last at least 2 years. All right. And since we know that we're going to a second lockdown, you can take advantage of that, and you can store it for when you can't get any food, right? If the government help runs out, and if you lose your job, you don't have to worry about having to go to a food bank, which, you know, you could still do to stock up even more, or make your what you stocked up last longer. But the point is that you're taking this into your own hands. You don't have to worry about other people doing it for you. All right. And if you're in the same situation where your family members, or, you know, your kids are getting, they're calling it pandemic EBT. All right. If you're getting that type of help from the government, then use it to your advantage, you know, and stock up on things. You know, I understand that that's throughout the month, but if you can reduce the meals just a little bit, or on some things that you buy, then you can buy a 50 pounds worth of rice and 50 pounds worth of beans and a bunch of canned goods, and places like that, or things like that. You can find them at Sam's or at Costco or something like that, you know. So it would be beneficial for you to be able to do that. All right, so I'm gonna let end the video here. But remember, we are seeing the timeline getting closer and closer to us, to where something else is gonna happen. Right now, it looks like the immediate thing is gonna be another round of lockdowns, and if they are gonna be enforced, then you have to prepare for that as well. And especially, there's going to be civil unrest coming behind it. All right. So remember, prepare, have your family ready. Don't wait for the last minute, as a lot of people did the first time around. All right. And get your stuff ready now. But anyways, my name is Jose Prado. And remember, always ready.
The Man-Made Survival Show.